I'll be honest, although Iron Man's suits in the MCU generally look amazing, there were still so many other fantastic suit designs that we just didn't get a chance to see. Tony Stark's comic history is packed to the brim with a jaw-dropping Iron Man armor that could do things like go to space, transform into cars, and even fight Celestials. How cool is that? Today, I'm going to talk about some of the best Iron Man suits from the comics that just didn't make it over to the MCU. Which one is the coolest? And which ones could we still potentially see down the line? Let's get into it right now. There's been a lot of discussion regarding just how similar Iron Man and Doctor Strange are. I mean, both are brilliant, arrogant narcissists who love to quip and rock that groovy facial hair. They also both experienced a major incident that set them on the path to become two of the strongest heroes in the MCU. But while Strange went the magic route, Tony Stark stayed in the tech realm. But what if I told you there was an Iron Man suit of armor that combined the mystical aspect of Doctor Strange's powers with Tony Stark's tech? You'd have one incredible Iron Man suit. This merging happened in the pages of What If comics, and it pretty simply presented the idea of what if Tony Stark became the Sorcerer Supreme instead of Stephen Strange. Instead of giving up his tech to focus on magic, Stark found a way to combine the two things together, making an Iron Man suit that was able to integrate things like the Cloak of Levitation and the Eye of Agamotto into the armor itself. He also came up with an incredible helmet design that I wish was more prevalent in the comics, but that's just my opinion. I just really love the idea of merging the tech with the magic, don't you? The MCU has made it pretty clear that there's a distinct line between the tech geniuses and the mystical magicians, and while they fought alongside each other, there's never been a full attempt at combining tech and magic to make something amazing. Could we see something like this happen in the MCU? Well, even though Tony is gone, let's never say never. This suit appeared in the What If comics, so there's always a chance this could show up in What If Season 2. Hey, if they do that, then there's a possibility that What If could finally treat Tony with some respect, because the Season 1 episodes, not so much. Or if you want to think of it in other terms, it looks like Spider-Man is getting his own mystical Doctor Strange-esque Spidey suit in No Way Home, and since Spidey suits were mostly designed by Stark and then Peter later, this might become the best example of a magic-infused tech suit in the MCU. Who are you gonna call? Godbuster! Alright, it's not a great introduction to what has been described as Tony Stark's masterpiece and his most powerful suit ever, but bear with me, okay? So we all know Tony Stark is one smart cookie, right? I mean, this is the guy who perfected time travel overnight and became an expert in thermonuclear astrophysics overnight, and man, Tony can do anything overnight, can't he? Anyway, he's a genius. But even geniuses have to deal with the limitations of those squishy things we call brains. But what if I told you there was a way to bypass those limitations? Well, that's how you get the Godbuster armor. So Tony once developed a virtual reality called Escape, and everyone lived happily ever after. No, of course that's not what happened, and in reality the program went haywire and Tony was abducted by the rogue operating system called Motherboard. But Tony eventually broke free of its influence, and while in the Escape, the limitations of Tony's human brain were no longer an issue, and thus the Godbuster armor was created. He used it to effortlessly defeat Motherboard, and the suit was immeasurable in its power. It's described as the ultimate weapon, and power readings of the suit were far beyond anything anyone had ever seen before. But after defeating Motherboard, Tony realized that this suit was just too much power for anyone and made it self-destruct. That was actually probably the smartest choice, since if he kept that around, not only would any battle be over in an instant, but it also would inevitably fall into the wrong person's hands, because that's what Tony's equipment does. I doubt we'll ever see this armor in the MCU, but it would be interesting if the upcoming Disney Plus show Armor Wars had enemies trying to use Tony's designs and tech to design something similar to this, forcing Rhodey to get involved and shut it down. Because of the Ultron debacle, chances are there will never be another attempt by anyone in the MCU to create artificial intelligence in a suit of armor. But that means we'll never get to see the Sentient Armor storyline come to life. So the Sentient Armor has an interesting creation. In one of his suits of armor, Tony downloaded Jocasta's AI into it, which accidentally caused the Ultron imperative to be put in that specific suit. Then, while fighting the villain Whiplash during a thunderstorm, the suit was hit with a massive electrical blast that caused the suit to basically come to life and be sentient. Things started off relatively okay as Tony and the new suit fought evil together, but soon, to absolutely no one's surprise, the sentient armor started to get a little out of control and more violent. Eventually, it wanted Tony to merge with it completely and grew extremely jealous of the idea of Tony in any other suit. So it did the very rational thing of dragging Tony to a deserted island, tying him up, and torturing him for a week to try to get what it wanted. And things started to look bleak here. Tony refused to merge with the Sentient Armor, and the Sentient Armor had created a synthetic Tony Stark decoy to be in the suit so that the other Avengers wouldn't notice he was gone. But when the Sentient Armor was going to eliminate Tony once and for all, Tony started suffering a massive heart attack. This moved the Sentient Armor so much that it ripped out its own cybernetic heart and stuffed it inside Tony in order to replace Tony's faulty ticker. Yep, that's how hearts work. As a way to honor the Sentient Armor, Tony gave it an Avengers-style burial, which was almost sweet. Now, again, we'd never see the Sentient Armor in the MCU, but what if in the upcoming Ironheart series, Riri Williams designs a sentient suit of armor that has Tony Stark's voice, and that becomes her fun sidekick? Okay, a bit of a stretch, but it would allow us to hear more Robert Downey Jr. quips in the MCU without undercutting his character's sacrifice. Although Tony Stark gave us a number of memorable moments in the MCU, I'll just come out and say it. It's disappointing that he never once piloted a gigantic suit of Iron Man armor. I mean, the closest we got was the Hulkbuster armor, but that's still relatively small potatoes compared to what could have been. Yes, I am of course referring to the Godkiller Mark II armor that was a celestial-sized Iron Man suit designed to specifically fight Celestials. Tony either based the design on the original Godkiller armor that was created eons ago, or he caught the end of a Power Rangers episode on TV and wanted to emulate it. I always forget which. Anyways, basically Tony Stark made a gigantic suit of armor to punch Celestials in the face, and if that's not awesome, then I don't know what is. It was powered by 8 nuclear reactors and could travel from Earth to Mars in just a few minutes. And although this suit was cool and cost $4 billion, it didn't last very long. During the fight with the Dark Celestials, the Godkiller suit was overwhelmed relatively quickly, and its systems were overloaded, causing Tony to eject, and the suit self-destructed. It's going to be hard to fit this into the MCU, but did y'all see Eternals? The Celestials are huge. If there ever was a time to start investing in a giant robot suit, it's now. You would expect the villainous version of Tony Stark to have a particularly villainous suit of armor, right? Well, that's the case with the superior Iron Man. Basically, take all the darkest possibilities of what Tony Stark could become, and you have this version of Anthony Stark. Like, he's not morally ambiguous or doing wrong for the right reasons, he's just a straight-up bad guy and tyrant. His suit ditches the familiar red and gold design for one that's mostly all white, and here's where it gets interesting. This version of Tony based this suit off of symbiote biology, and it's a full liquid smart metal that hardens instantly on connection with the user's body, which means there's no tech involved and the startup is completely psionic. It can create tendrils like the symbiotes, change its shape and mass, and has all the general qualities you'd expect from an Iron Man suit. Now, using this suit in the MCU sorta leads into my biggest desire in the MCU, and that's to introduce an evil Iron Man. Thanks to the multiverse, we're about to meet different versions of our favorite characters, and I think it's the perfect time to meet an alternate evil version of the character who just sacrificed himself to save our universe. Imagine a dark Tony in this Endo-Sym armor leading a group of evil Avengers as they try to save their own universe by destroying ours. What this does is make our Tony look even more heroic than he already does. Huzzah! Alright, this one may not be as cool as the other ones on this list, but it does provide an interesting new environment that we could see Iron Man navigate in. It's his Hydro armor. Yeah, a lot of suits can function underwater at an okay level, but the Hydro armor was specifically designed to go deep underwater to explore its depths. It had updated weaponry like mini torpedoes and a special type of repulsor blast, as well as had the ability to create a mini electrical field around itself like an electric eel. And just for an added piece of fun, the suit could also release an inky black cloud like an octopus in case Tony needed to make a quick underwater escape. With Namor most likely being the main villain of Black Panther 2, that's going to require a lot of underwater scenes. And it would be cool if there's a modified Black Panther suit that doubled as a Hydro armor replica. Yes, it wouldn't be an Iron Man suit, but I'll take what I can get in terms of deep sea advanced armor replica. Admittedly, the stealth armor is the most un-Iron Man armor on this list, but I think that in itself makes it kind of cool. Offensively, you're probably in trouble, so don't try to fight crime in this, as really its sole purpose is to be sneaky. Like, its original version had no weapon systems at all, but highlighted radar-absorbing coating and ECM jamming, among other things. And I just think seeing Tony Stark in such a quiet, unassuming suit is hilarious. Tony Stark is all about big entrances with a lot of flair, so I'd imagine he'd he'd wear this suit and struggle to not make a single quip as he sneaks around whatever evil lair he's trying to infiltrate. I also like the idea of this suit because it shows that the Iron Man suits don't have to just be for offensive purposes, but rather can be used tactically too. Admittedly, we did see this suit briefly in the MCU in Iron Man 3 as part of the Iron Legion, but it definitely didn't have its time to shine, or not shine as it were, because it's sneaky. Yeah, you get it. Alright, it was bound to happen eventually, right? I mean, his name is Iron Man, so you would totally expect him to, actually have a suit of armor made of iron at one point in time. I mean, I guess Iron Man just rolls off the tongue in a way Gold Titanium Alloy Man just doesn't, and he probably doesn't want to change the name to Nano Man after switching to nanotechnology in the later MCU movies. But anyways, that brings us to the Cold Iron Suit, which I think is actually the coolest sounding name on this list. It's a suit that's, yes, made out of iron, but is for a very specific reason. Iron is the Dark Elves' biggest weakness, so when in the comics Tony was helping out and fighting Malekith, he needed a suit that could do some serious damage. Besides looking like it packed some extremely heavy artillery, it also had 2 iron claws on each arm so that Tony could run around stabbing Dark Elves left and right. Yeah, it was absolutely packed with iron-related weapons like this, including its ability to shoot out an iron hook or release a cloud of iron nails. Now, picture Tony in this suit helping Thor in Thor the Dark World. That's often referred to as one of the worst MCU films, but imagine if they were able to include Tony Stark in the movie and have him develop this suit. Yeah, pretty sure that it would be in people's top 3 MCU films ever. Yes, we've already seen the Hulkbuster in the MCU in full force, but that doesn't mean we've seen all of what the Hulkbuster could do. There was once a point in the comics when the Hulkbuster armor was able to transform itself into a car with a push of a button. That's right, because after a hard day of Hulk busting, you don't want to get out of the suit and then find wherever you parked and drive home. Nope, it's just much easier to turn directly into a car and go from there. It's a sort of ridiculous upgrade, and you have to wonder if Tony was hooked on Transformer cartoons the day before designing this feature. Now, I just picture a scenario where in Infinity War, in the scene where Banner is in the Hulkbuster armor and doesn't quite know how to work it yet, he presses a button and then it turns into a giant car that he uses to race around the Infinity War battlefield. Oh, did I mention that it was a flying car? That makes all the difference. Even though this whole idea is a bit ridiculous, I am surprised we haven't got a variation of Tony's suits turning into other things type of thing yet. Dane Whitman being introduced in the MCU, I want this franchise to get a bit medieval. And when I think of medieval times and Iron Man, I think of the time he fused with Excalibur to create a brand new superpowered suit. In the comics, this happened when Iron Man was battling Dr. Doom, and the end result was a knightly suit of Iron Man armor that still retained its technological base. Plus, the most important aspect is that this upgrade made the Iron Man suit not only magically invulnerable, but also stuck him with a fantastic hairdo. That's right, for some reason, Excalibur merging with the Iron Man suit put a ponytail on top of the Iron Man armor. Like, yeah, I could talk about Iron Man's new mystic repulsors or his general new magic demeanor, but come on, that hair is just so distracting. Can you imagine if there was something similar to this in the MCU where whoever lifted Thor's hammer automatically got Thor's luscious locks, no matter what they were wearing? I'm sort of glad this armor didn't stick around because it just raises way too many questions. So if Tony had made a deep space armor like he did in the comics, then that whole beginning of Endgame could have been avoided. His deep space armor allows him to operate and work in space, and although that doesn't sound as cool as the Godbuster armor or the armor that gives him a magic ponytail, I wanted to talk about the deep space armor because this was once rumored to be heavily featured in the MCU. Back in the days of Iron Man 3, there were rumors that the post-credit scene of that film would see Tony perfect his deep space armor and travel up to space where he'd meet the Guardians of the Galaxy. Instead, we got Tony talking to Bruce like a psychiatrist, so I'll admit it was kind of disappointing. Can you imagine how much the MCU would be different if Iron Man had traveled to space and saw the cosmos as early as Iron Man 3? I think the entire landscape would be different. You would think there's not anything more OP than nanotechnology, but we can't forget Tony's virtual armor, which was made out of solid holograms. How does it work? Science, that's how. But overall, the armor is an invisible force around Tony that makes it look like he's not wearing any armor at all, but with one thought, he can create literally anything he wants. So if he was being basic, he can just think repulsor beam and then would shoot repulsor beams. It's an absolutely insane idea, and the only reason that I'd want this suit in the MCU is that it would allow us to actually see RDJ's face and body the whole time and not just make a ton of reasons why he'd take his face shield off. Does this even count as a suit? limit? I don't even know, but Tony has said this is one of his most powerful suits where the only limit is his imagination. Wild. One suit that I'm happy never made it to the MCU, the one with the nose helmet. Yeah, back in the 70s, there was a period of time where Tony put a nose on his traditionally flat facial covering. I guess for aesthetic purposes? Well, as you could guess, both fans and even Tony's fellow Avengers mocked him relentlessly for it. Yeah, glad that's gone.